Many people today don't consider themselves religious. They don't call themselves religious. And that ranges from people who attend religious services regularly to those who are sort of at the opposite end of the spectrum, who call themselves spiritual but not religious. Today I want to talk about how it is that things have evolved to a place where that term of being religious is uncomfortable for people, particularly in Western cultures. As I do, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel and click the bell as I explain the 4 reasons that I've identified why people don't want to be called religious. First off, I think that while many people are engaged in spiritual practices, there's a lack of recognition or awareness or knowledge that the spiritual practices that people engage in actually grew out of religion. So people meditate, they may walk a labyrinth, perhaps they chant or light candles, perhaps they even observe the solstices with rituals or the new moon. Whatever it may be, there's often a lack of understanding or awareness or background that all of these practices came from religion. Now, it may have been a religion different from what the individual is familiar with. Maybe that's part of the disconnect. But the practices we have that we really value as spiritual practices are things that have been honed over generations through the practice of religion. And that's how people have come to understand that these are valuable spiritual practices. That's their grounding. Now, perhaps part of the lack of awareness of that is that people have learned these things in a studio or a health club or from a YouTube video or from some other context that is clearly not religious or not traditional. But the history and the generations of work behind that are still true. But I think that makes it easier for us to separate out that idea that a spiritual practice isn't religious, but it's my personal spiritual practice. It's what I do. And we don't have the context for that. So I think that's part of why talking about being a religious person doesn't feel quite right for people. The second reason has to do with how religion functions in the West. Whenever you join a religion, especially in Western culture, you're joining that religion by affirming a creed, a statement of faith, a series of statements that articulate what it is that people in that religion believe, so that there's a rational component to this. And by saying that I believe these things, that's referred to as faith, so that faith becomes something totally intellectual. It's totally up here, and you agree with it or you don't. That's a hard thing for most people. You know, religions don't ask, have you experienced this? Do you know this to be true in your life? Nor do they ask, often, do you understand what these things mean? Instead, they're presented as, these are the things you have to accept to join. Now, people don't accept things from authorities any longer. That ship has sailed. I mean, people don't accept scientific fact as fact. Anybody feels like they can question scientific facts today. People don't accept medical treatment or advice from their doctor as having any merit, even though it's based on all kinds of research and evidence to support it. So in that context, it's easy to understand why people wouldn't accept a religious authority and not want to sign on to something that they're just not sure is true for their own experience. Instead, people want to be able to experience and come to know for themselves what's true. And that becomes part of why spirituality is very important. A third reason why people are uncomfortable with the term of religion and religiosity and religiousness has to do with the level of harm and hurt religion has done to people. Now, the headlines have been all about things like sexual abuse and financial abuse in religious institutions. We know those things. but there are multiple levels of the kinds of harm and hurt that have been done. So, for instance, people who have had mental illnesses have been told that what they really have is a demon, and that demon needs to be cast out from them. What they've really needed is support to find appropriate mental health care. People who have been outside the norm in some way, and I'm talking about sexual orientation, gender identity, as well as people who are overly outgoing, extroverted, and have a really big laugh. This whole range of people have often been told in religious situations that there's something wrong with them, that they need to conform to a certain standard of behavior. And in that, there's been a lot of hurt and pain. Even people who fit into the mold and are really trying to be good people and really striving to be the best people they can be are often told, frequently told, that because of who you are from birth a sinner, there's something wrong with you, that you need to be saved from something that you can't even recognize in yourself, that you're fundamentally a horrible person. None of these things fit within people's experience. None of it makes sense. And it's abusive, it's hurtful, and it's never named as that. I can tell you with a surety that the people who have treated me worse in my life, the absolute most egregious things that have been done to me, have been done by religious people. And often they've told me they're doing this for my own good and because they care about me. And I believe they believed that. They thought that was true. But what they were doing was being very hurtful and malicious. I've experienced that. Many people have experienced that. Why would somebody volunteer to have that kind of experience? People don't want to be associated with that. So I think because of the level of hurt and harm, people want to distance themselves from religion. And fourth, when we look historically at the history of religion, what we see is a lot of violence. We see that wars have been fought where believers of the same religion have killed each other because of minor doctrinal differences. We see that there have been inquisitions, there have been crusades, there's been the subjugation of other people. And this isn't just Christian history. This is history of world religion, that if you look back, you see this time and time again, particularly the way kings and emperors have used religion to build their war chests and to fight and destroy others. All in the name of religion, all from religions based on teachings of love and peace. It doesn't make any sense. So as you look at this whole picture, it makes a lot of sense that people wouldn't want to call themselves religious or associate very closely with a religion today. Instead, people value their own spiritual experience. And I think that's neither good nor bad. I think that's part of the evolution that's occurred, that people realize that there's some way that they need peace, that they need healing, they need wholeness in their life. And if they're not finding it from the institutions purported to provide it, they'll find it on their own. And I think that's a good thing. I think the downside of that is that often people seek out that spiritual growth and development in isolation and without community. And the process of spiritual growth and wholeness works best when there are other people who are part of the process who support you in that process. So I think the missing piece here is really, where does community come from today? And we know that from the studies on loneliness that are happening in the United States and in Europe, that there's an epidemic of loneliness and isolation, and that's only increased since the pandemic. So while I really applaud people searching out their own spiritual growth and development, I want to also encourage people to find connections with others, to share in that experience, because our best growth happens when we're with others. Thanks for your time today. Subscribe, share the video, leave me some comments, and know that I really appreciate your presence watching Spirituality Beyond Borders. Thank you.